Thank you all for joining me on this very special interview episode of the Mentor ESQ podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different than the typical lawyer stuff. Many of you know that there is an organization that I've been very proud to be connected to called the Water Project. And the Water Project is an organization that works very hard to bring clean, potable water to small villages, schools, and people in sub-Saharan Africa. And I got involved with the Water Project probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I remember being on a subway in New York City on my commute to work and reading an article in the news about the Water Project and what good work was being done. And it sort of struck a chord with me because I couldn't believe that with all the technology we have today, everything that's going on and all the material things that I see on my commute just to Midtown Manhattan around me, that there are still people that don't have clean water, that the simple act of taking a sip of water or turning on a faucet doesn't exist. Not only that it doesn't exist, but the difficulties in getting that water and people that would have to travel for miles in barefoot and drinking bad water and getting sick and what happens, the snowball effect of that, just how horrific it was. And I thought, if I'm going to get involved in giving, which I hadn't really been involved in at that time, and I wanted to, this is the type of organization I want to get involved in. And I did. And many years later now, I've been very fortunate to have been involved in numerous projects to help bring water to others. And the Water Project is just phenomenal. And that's why anything that I do that normally could be sold or to make money off of, such as my ebooks, my podcasts, anything that could generate fees, all those fees go to the Water Project. I don't take anything on those. I have a campaign. If you're watching this video, you can see the backdrop where I'm always looking to raise money. And I thought it would be wonderful to share with you. I reached out to the Water Project and I asked if they'd be kind enough to see if their founder and president, Peter Chasse, if he would be interested in joining me for a podcast. And he's here. And Peter, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. It's really been fun to be in relationship with you over the past number of years and to watch your philanthropy grow. And as you've gotten into this work to understand what we're doing, just to see your passion grow in this too. It's been a blast. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, can you give us an overview of what the Water Project is, what the Water Project does, who's behind it, how does it work, give us first an overview of things, and then we can get into it and talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I love to talk about our sort of our growth as an organization, because I think in a lot of ways it's a lot how even donors like you that come to this grow in their understanding what we do and how they can be involved and how close that they can get to the work. And but the Water Project, most simply, is we're an organization that's providing water and sanitation solutions to people in rural sub-Saharan Africa, so eastern and central Kenya, Uganda, Sierra Leone. It's rural in that these folks are outside of the urban areas of those countries. They're often the last served by government, if they ever get served, because they're so far from the city centers. And they're suffering needlessly without water. And that's a really important set of words for us, that suffering needlessly. One, as you started to describe, it is suffering. I mean, these most often young girls and women are carrying water over a mile distance early in the morning, late at night, when it's dangerous, when they're alone on the road, and they're gathering water that's dirty and making themselves and their families sick. That's the suffering. And it's needless because in the places that we're working, it's not a lack of water, it's a lack of access to water. So that water's trapped underground, maybe it falls from the sky, there's nowhere to trap it. It's a spring that maybe flows out of the side of a mountainside, but is just filthy dirty because no one has known how to take care of it and protect it. But when you think about it, that's needless suffering. The solution is as close as $1 or a few dollars, and some folks that that have the expertise to put these projects together to get water to these communities and then make it last. And so what we do is we work with our local teams, which are in most places are autonomous organizations. So they're local, non-governmental organizations is what they're called, group of people that care about their own community, much like we have community development folks here in the United States that, work in the in neighborhoods in New York City. These folks are working in their own neighborhoods and communities. They know these people. They're in relationship with them. They live there. And we're like a backbone. We provide the services, the training, equipment, funds, the kind of business acumen skills that we can bring. Some they'll bring us to the table as well. They know their markets better than we do. And we get them the investment that they need to repair a broken down water point, to protect a water spring, to catch water off of a roof and store it safely in a tank. Or, what we all kind of know is the image of getting water, which is a hand pump. Someone that's pumping water out of the ground. We do those too, both rehabs and new installations. And so, as an organization, we started much like a donor. We were a donor. We heard of the problem, like you and I can tell you that story. And we got involved and we found people that were doing this work, and we went out and fundraised, much like your family's done. I think around the holidays a couple of years ago, your family did this, and we started there. And that's where we learned about this work, and we learned what worked, and we started to learn what wasn't working. And as we got to that point, we were building relationships with these teams that I just mentioned on the ground, and realized there's a real place for us to dig in as a, no pun intended, as an implementing backbone to bring these organizations together, to equip them more fully, and really to begin to scale this work. And so that's kind of where we are today, almost 16 years later. That's hard to believe.
Can you give us an idea of the scope of the team, your team, the people on the ground, or how many places you've brought water to, or how many people you've affected, what the reach is? Are you big? Are you small? Can you give us a sense of that?
It's interesting. I think we're a small organization that's having a very outsized impact in the water sector as a whole. So I say small because a lot of water organizations will measure their bigness by how many water points they put in the ground. The thing that we've learned over the years is a lot of those water points don't work anymore. And so it's a little bit of a false count to say, well, we installed 1,000, but only, 200 of them still work. So for us, we're working in 3 different countries at the moment. As I mentioned, was Kenya, Uganda, and Sierra Leone. In those countries, I think the combined number of people getting water today is approaching 700,000. So that's a number that we look at every morning. That's live data from the field. We actually posted on our website across the various water project reports of people that are actually being served today. So we're not counting anybody where things have broken down. We're not counting things where we've lost touch. This is the number of people that we know we're serving on a daily basis. So that gives you a kind of a sense of the scale. We've often up here in New England, we'll count that in number of Patriot stadiums of people. It helps us get our head around it a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of people. In terms of like the reach, just in one of the areas we work in Western Kenya alone, the geographic reach of the program is like the state of New Hampshire in terms of width. And it goes all the way down to what would be the Massachusetts border from where we are, in Concord, our headquarters. And that's just one of the places that we work, where we're trying to saturate a region. And then in terms of the number of people that it takes to do all this, we have about 14 or so people in the headquarters, which is here in Concord, or in different offices. We're all working remotely these days around the States. But then there's 120, 140 people that are directly employed in the work that we're investing in throughout the different partners and teams that we have on the ground. So and then we have our regional service hub, which is another 20 folks that are directly employed by us, 20 plus, that's in Kenya, which is a new thing that we've been developing over the last couple of years. So that gives a sense of kind of the scope. Now, in terms of, are we the biggest water charity out there? And by no means. There are others that are doing, work at a larger scale. But what we are really focused on is this idea of delivering clean, safe and reliable water. And all of those things have to be true. And clean first-time water is relatively easy. Safe water is harder, and reliable water is even harder than that. And so that's been the big, and I want to call it change, that's happened over 15 years, is this understanding that for this work to be truly effective, right, for people's lives to really be changed by it, water has to flow every single day. And that's the challenge. And so the first part of that for us was bringing that truth to light. Some folks were beginning to uncover that. We really just kind of went for it and said, we're just going to post all of our data online and show people whether this stuff's working. And then, look out in the larger sector, and then people are starting to wake up and say, people are doing research and finding 40, 50, 60% of installed water points didn't work anymore. That's not solving the water crisis. That's just moving it from one organization to the next. And so in terms of our legacy as an organization, Our legacy is going to be moving the entire water sector to a place of sustainability and to a place of reliability of water. What does it mean to serve actual people every single day? And as we've been doing that well, then tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives well beyond our direct impact happens. And so, as an investor in the water project, it's more than just the water point that you put in. It's the expectation that water should flow every day that literally is flowing outside of our organization.
As a donor, I've been impressed with the amount of information that I receive. And I think that it's important that people know that. One of the things it's not easy for people to get involved, I think, in charity and in giving money for causes, because there's a lot of suspicion. There's a lot of uncertainty that if you're giving money, what is it going to? Even to, very well-known big companies, big, wonderful organizations. You write your check, they say thank you, and you really don't know how it's going to play out or what's happening. And I'm approached personally and professionally for a lot of causes. And what I've learned through the Water Project, which I think is just phenomenal that you do, is that you educate the donors. So I've learned a lot, and I'll share a little bit of what I've learned. But in addition to that, you provide so much detailed information before, during, and after the project. So to give our listeners sort of an idea, one of the things that I've done is I've learned a lot from working with you and your team. I've learned the different ways that water can be brought. You can do a big catch basin, which is basically a big tank is built to catch fresh water that can be used. You can build these wells out of sand and put pumps in, and it's natural drainage in certain areas that are designed and built in special dams. I think they're called sand dams, something to that. Different types of pumps, different types of irrigation, ways to bring water in that I didn't know about. And then what I learned was that it's not just about bringing water to drink or wash your hands with. There's a snowball effect to having water has allowed them to save it, to keep their crops going, to sell their crops, to make money. Having water helps them to clean their hands, to prevent bacteria, to keep kids from getting and family members from getting ill. And then the Water Project also is involved in education. That you have teams of people that go, and after the water's installed, showing people, children and adults, how to wash their hands, what sanitation is, that things that we take for granted in the Western world that people they don't know, and then I'm able to, and any donor who wants to get involved, to pick the projects to get involved in. And so I was able to see each time I would get pictures of a village or a school. And I think, most of the projects I've been involved in have been schools. Having a daughter of school age, there's nothing better for me than seeing the joy on children's faces, and the thought of my daughter not being able to get fresh water at school and that there are kids out there made me want to get involved with all the school opportunities. And so first it starts off with seeing pictures of these kids walking 2 miles barefoot to try and get water. And you hear from the teachers of how difficult it is, how it affects their ability to learn and to be healthy. And then you get involved in the project, and then I get updates, and I see photographs of the wells being built and the catch basins being built. And then you get photographs, you get updates of the project. Then you get photographs when it's done, and videos, and you see the pure joy and smile on the children and the people's faces as water is running from this tap. It is just it's so hard to put into words the joy that it brings me and my family. And my daughters, did a project to raise money for her bat mitzvah for a school. And the school kids came out with their teacher, and they recorded a video and called her a hero and thanked her and sent us this video. And it brings tears to our eyes. I have it actually up on my website. If anyone wants to check it out, if you go to the Mentor ESQ and go to the Water Project, you can see this video. It's up there. And we have the links in the description of this podcast for the Water Project. And you could go to the Mentor ESQ website to learn more and see the links. But now there's an app on the phone that I just pulled up today, and it shows my impact of over 1,000 people just from the projects I've been involved in getting water. Shows the status of everything. You could see all the pictures. So there's an intimacy of connecting. And you and your team have been kind enough to share with me that if the time comes that I'm willing and able to travel over to Kenya or Uganda to where we've been involved, that you'll make sure that we can go meet the village people and the schools and see the work. And I can't wait for that day to come. It will come. And so I want to thank you for allowing me to get involved in this way. But I thought it'd be important to share for people that are hesitant to give. And you don't have to give a lot because you don't have to fund a whole project. You can join in on any project, give $30. I mean, anything. So if you could share, what you're hearing from me and how that relates to how the water project is so special.
Yeah, it started for us, and thank you for that. Those incredibly kind words, and because it hearing from you reflected back like what we intend to do, that feels good. So thanks for that. It means a lot to our team that they do put a ton of work into getting that data out. It does not happen automatically to move that much pictures and that much data to not just you, but all of our donors that are doing this as well. We provide this for everybody, but it comes from a place, of our own experience, of my own experience. When I first heard about the water crisis, it was from a gentleman named Titus, who had come over from Kenya to talk to it was a room full of pastors where I was leading a church at the time up in Canada. This was 16 years ago. And he started talking about all the problems that they have in those communities: hunger, HIV, AIDS, poverty. I mean, he went down the list of things and I sat there and thought, how am I going to possibly do anything about those problems? I've heard about them all before. They're huge. My little contribution's not going to have any impact. I'm just going to feel guilty at the end of this guy's talk again. But as he spoke, was something about this thick Kenyan accent, and he was speaking a million miles an hour because he knew he had 5 minutes. So I kind of captured my attention and my imagination. And that's when he got to the point that whatever you wanted to do to make life better in the communities that he was serving, it had to start with access to clean water. And then he explained how approachable it was in terms of just the price, honestly, how much money it would cost. So it went from this big, huge number with all this complexity that I couldn't understand to serving one community and maybe just a couple of families in that community with my portion of the donation. But I could get my head around that. I can understand it. So I just had to be a part of it. And naively, he wanted to fund 5 water projects. I figured I had a background in internet marketing at the time, which so 16 years ago meant I was doing it for 2 years like everybody else. Yeah. And so I had some means, and I thought, well, maybe we could do some, and then I can get the church to do some. And I was like, so I ran up to this guy at the end of his talk, and I said, we'll take all 5. And here's where your story, kind of intersects with mine, where they're very similar. In that moment, I thought he would just say, thank you. And I would write a check at some point, and that would be it. That would be the end of the transaction of charity. He asked, I gave, he said, thank you, we were done. Because most charity tended to be like that. And you're not really sure what happens, but you trust that it does the right thing. But that wasn't his reaction. He simply put his hand on my shoulder and said, you must come. And it was an invitation. And at the time, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. That was not my intent. I didn't intend to get to know Titus any better. I didn't intend to know the work that much more. I just wanted the transaction. It's the best I understood about what charity was. But he knew better. And whether he really knew better, it was just one of these moments where kind of the universe does what it needs to do, and it creates this relationship. But that invitation to come led me a couple of years later to actually go. And I'll never forget walking into his office in the middle of Kenya now, completely outside of my context of anything I knew. And he's wearing that same tweed jacket that he was wearing the night that he gave the talk. And he smiled, huge smile across his face. And he said, I told you you would come. And so at that point, we're just starting to build the organization. So we had gotten some momentum and we were funding a few more water projects. And I wanted for people to experience what I experienced. I wanted to be able to create the invitation for people to get closer to the work that they were funding, just the way Titus had invited me to do that. And then a funny thing happened. We had gotten on the web at that point. So we were on the Facebook, which had just come out. And we had a website, very, crude back in 2006. And this guy from Western Canada who was looking for oil or something in northern Kenya and he had to make some donation to the government of Kenya to get this thing to happen. But anyway, he wanted to give us a bunch of money. It never happened, but that was what he wanted to do. And on that first call, which was the first time anybody out of our little sphere had kind of reached out and said, hey, we want to get involved, which was exciting. He said, so here's the thing. I'm going to tell you a story. He goes, I last Christmas wanted to get one of these gifts for my grandkids, and they have everything they want. We're rich. We got everything we need. They don't need anything else. So I figured I'll get one of those charity catalogs. I'm going to buy them some goats. I'm going to buy in honor of my grandchildren, I'm going to buy goats for some poor farm, in Africa. And he said, so I did. And I bought a lot of goats. That's what he said. And so he made a big investment, made a big donation. And he said, and about 6 months later, he figured, well, I want to see the goats. And so he picks up the phone. He calls this charity that had advertised that they were going to buy goats with his money. And he said to the person that answered the phone, can you show me the goats? And he said he heard an audible gasp on the other end of the line.
Wow.
Which I think we understand, like when we buy from those catalogs, that they're representative gifts, like the idea. But that wasn't the world he knew anymore. Like, he was on Facebook, he was on the web. He knew he could be connected with lots of detail and pictures about real things and tangible things. So it was perfectly reasonable for him to say, show me the goats. And it kind of became a mantra for us at the Water Project from then on. Even though we never ended up getting to work with him, we swore sort of an oath to ourselves and our donors, we're just going to show you the goats. And so that meant for us from day one, everything we see, you see. And we're going to curate it in a way that makes sense to you, right? But we're not going to delete anything. We're not going to be afraid of the data. We're not going to be afraid of failure, or when we get things wrong, or if we have to go back 3, 4, 5 times to the same community to get it right. Because if we do that, we might actually begin to create a relationship with you as the person that's supporting our work, who's really truly sitting at the same table with the folks that are building the water projects and then the people that are getting clean water. And what a great way to do charity. It moves it from that place of transaction, which is what I wanted originally. There's nothing wrong with that. But there was so much more to be involved. Like, there was so much deeper of an experience than just writing a check and moving on. And we got to discover that because we started out as donors, and we got to learn along the way like you have. And it was compelling, and we wanted to know more. And so that's what we do. We're creating an invitation for every donor that comes to the table with us. How much do you want to see? Because the end of that answer is whatever you want it to be, and we will help you get there. And I think you've seen some of that, and sometimes it might even feel overwhelming in terms of the information, but we'll pick up the phone, ask a question. We'll walk you through it. It's just kind of who we are. And it hasn't been hard. In fact, it's really easy. Like, truth, right? The truth is easy. Yeah. It's when you do 7 different stories for 7 different people, your life gets complex. But as a charity, tell one story. Just tell the truth. It's a blast.
It's really amazing. And it's so true. And, there's not too many things in the world where you can write checks and truly see the results of it, whatever that may be, especially when it's people involved in the work that's going on. So I really encourage if you as our listener have not had the opportunity to just look around and see these photos and see these videos and see the impact, it's very moving. And it's interesting for me, I've been talking, Peter, a lot about in my podcast, and to everyone who will listen, about your journey in life. And we all, I guess that's what wisdom is as we get older. And I can't say I have gray hair on my head, but I got a little of my beard now. And I've started to realize over the years, wisdom, you learn more, you reflect more, you've just lived more, you have more life experience. And then, when you get to a point where you're trying to say, what does all this matter? What am I doing? I've been speaking with a lot of people lately. I've been doing these one-on-ones where I've met with, upwards of almost 100 lawyers now. I do 30-minute Zooms. It's been really cool. And so many of us are at crossroads for various reasons, either starting off in law and not knowing which direction to go, or having been in law for a long time and not sure whether to stay in it or switch, or, and with the pandemic raising a lot of different variables for people, good and bad, of decisions. And one constant I find is that people are looking to be happy and to be satisfied. And what's going to get you there? Is it money? Is it time with your family? There's so many answers to that. But a constant I've started to see is relationships that truly day to day, week to week, month to month, your interaction with other people, if you're having positive interactions on a regular basis, I think you're going to feel joy and satisfaction. If you're constantly having negative interactions, that's a bad thing. And so it's important to develop relationships that you find to be valuable, that it's a given forth, that it's not a one-way relationship. And I heard you mention something that I either heard you speak on or lecture on, where you talked about in dealing with donors, how you take them from a place of a transaction to a relationship. Mm-hmm. And that really struck a chord with me, because as a lawyer, I'm always looking to move on from a transaction to a relationship. You know, the lifeline and the bloodline for many lawyers is referrals. And we rely on people to refer us cases. We refer cases to other. And it's one thing to have someone call me up and say, yeah, I was given your name by such and such lawyer. And then you take the case and you go from there. It's a transaction. That lawyer provided a case to you. But then when I get to know that lawyer and get the lawyer involved and we talk and I thank for the referral and what do you do? And let's catch up and let's meet. Then the relationship builds. It builds into more business together. It could lead to other cases and back and forth. And there's just so much more to be had. And I feel that a lot of people don't go beyond that transaction to the relationship. Yeah. And even in my adversarial work life, where I'm litigating against people, instead of a transaction, you know, I need this, give me that, you didn't respond to my demand, or whatever it is. When I get to know my adversaries, hey, by the way, you know, things are crazy, and we make small talk and get to know each other, things just get a lot better, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious of your take, whether it's with the people that you're assisting or working with in Africa, the donors, your colleagues at the Water Project, of relationship building and what that means to you in your world.
Yeah, it's the center of everything. And as you were talking, I was sitting and thinking of another word too, which I've been talking to some other sort of friends and colleagues about, which is that when we're in relationship with one another, when we move like from the email or the Slack or the even sometimes like video calls can lack some of this. We recapture, like when we get face to face, we recapture humanity. So you mentioned being in an adversarial relationship, like in the courtroom, and you've got the judge and you got the other side of the defense, or and it could be very transactional. It can be just about like litigating through the rules of how things are, and you can really lose people's humanity in that, right? So the worst caricatures of lawyers we've seen really are that. Like if you pull the humanity out, that's the worst caricature of a lawyer. But the truth is, you're human beings. And if you just let that out, as you said, things smooth, like all of a sudden, like magically almost, things kind of get better, because we recognize you're just a human trying to help your client to flourish. And on the other side of the case is someone that's trying to help their client to flourish. And justice is that you find a fair middle for that, right? Justice is that you say, oh, we found a place where we both can flourish, and we don't have to just take all we can from the other person. So anyway, I think that's, the humanity piece, I think, is something we've all come face to face with during the pandemic, because we've all had humanity stripped out of so many relationships. We can't meet face to face. We're on Zoom all the time. Everything's happening on email, and some relationships have broken because of that, because we haven't had that. But in our work, we kind of knew this before the pandemic hit, because we recognized, really like halfway through our journeys, like year 7 or 8, we sat down to say, like, what are our values as an organization? And a lot of orgs will do this in the beginning, and they'll kind of pick words and they'll stick them on the wall and they'll kind of work toward that. We did it a little differently, in that we kind of looked in the rearview mirror and said, who are we? And can we put some words on a wall? And it was like, it just flowed right out of us, no pun intended. But it was relationship, reliability, and trust. And relationship was that first, that key. But relationship is fascinating if you think of it in terms of like a tense, like time, past, present, and future. Relationship sits in that magical middle of the present, and it's always fleeting. It's always in the moment, and you always have to be nurturing it. It's not something you do and then you're done with. That would be the past. And it's not something you can just have good intention to do in the future. You have to do it moment by moment. And so when you're in relationship with a person, it's genuine, you know it. You can't fake it. Like, we all know we're humans, we know what relationship is. But then you think about, like, and I talked about this a little bit about our work, and that we've discovered that reliability is what it's all about. Like, water has to flow every single day. reliability is a part of relationship as well. Like when you call on a friend, are they there? When you need something from a colleague, do they follow through? Is your word what you say it is? Like, do you do what you say you're going to do? Is that the kind of character you are and the kind of person you are? And the beautiful thing about that is, and then the scary thing is that it's the rearview mirror. Like, it's the past. You know it. You can't fix it. People are just going to look, and it's either there or it isn't. So you're either a reliable person or you aren't. If you're in relationship with someone, so that, like, you're communicating day to day, if you put those two things together, then you get to do this amazing thing, which is trust. And that's the future. And so in our work, that's unbelievably, it's just so critical that we can trust one another, because we need to take risks. We need to ask our teams and our partners to try new things that might not work out, things where they'll wonder, well, what happens if this goes wrong? What if we try this newfangled technology? It's a disaster. Are you going to hold that against us? But if we've been a reliable partner that's always been there, that's always had their best interest in mind, we've proven that's our character, and we're in a relationship with them, so we're talking about this as humans, face to face, one-on-one, you can do almost anything with that kind of trust. And we just live in those values. And I think any of us can, in any kind of work that we do. If you've proven yourself to be of high character and to follow through, and you're the kind of personable person man, you can ask somebody to do almost anything with you. I'll go with you all day long if I've seen the rearview mirror and we're in it in the day to day, and maybe that's just like that's who we are as human beings. I think ultimately we want to flourish, and we want other people to flourish as well. I think that's just in our core of who we are, and I think what relationship does is it lets us revisit that every time we have those conversations. We recognize, they're not my enemy. They're not the adversary. We're just trying to get to something that's fair and just in the middle. Or we're just trying to, do for our family what is best. And so are they. And so I can give a little bit in that scenario, rather than get all the time. So yeah, I think that's where relationship sits for us. And then you had mentioned something else in the beginning of that I wanted to kind of touch on. Oh, like the journey part of it, right? This idea that life is this journey. And I think we all come to a place, and I think a lot of us have come to it all at once in the middle of COVID, maybe because we had some solitary time. We had to lock ourselves away. You guys in New York City had it the worst. I mean, just getting locked in apartments. One of our, Mike, who works for us, was locked in his apartment for six weeks, and he said, I never want to go through that again. So he lives here now. But we've all kind of had these epiphany moments in the last couple of years. We go, what am I doing with my life? A lot of people have quit their jobs. A lot of people are thinking about or changing internally, or like, what am I going to do next? And for me, part of the moment was obviously meeting Titus and hearing his story, like experiencing his humanity and understanding the struggles that young girls were dealing with, especially gathering water every day. That was the light bulb. But as I was having that, as he was explaining that, the word picture that was in my head was, so I said we were living in Canada, and it was the first time in my life that I had a well. Because I've been on city water my whole life. I actually grew up outside New York City. So the water always just came out of the tap from the city, and we never thought about it. But here in Canada, we had a well in the backyard. And we lived at the bottom of a hill. It was near a river. And I'll never forget, and it was like February. And February in that part of Canada was like cold. But I was outside in the backyard, and I heard water running. And I thought, that's not a good sign. When you hear water running in the city in the middle of February, just call somebody, because that's bad. And so I kind of found the sound. It was underneath this box. I picked it up, and it was the head of the well, the pipe sticking out of the ground, which again, I had never seen before. Caked in ice, icicles hanging, like just big block of ice cube. So I chiseled it off, and underneath was a number, and it was a local number. So I called, and the person on the other end at the well company, said, what's going on? I said, well, I got this thing. It's water busting out the top. It must be broken. She laughed at me, and she said, oh, honey, that's an artesian well. It just flows by itself. It's got so much water in it. I was like, okay, that's great. And later that spring, when it thawed out, I did some more discovery and found out that in the normal part of the year, there's actually a pipe underground, because so much water was in this well that it would flow into a drain and just drain off into the river, like a 1-inch pipe, just gushing water. And in the winter, there was so much water that it would overflow out of the overflow. And like, that was the moment as Titus was explaining his story of the struggles they had in their community, when I put that picture together of like my life, here in the West, those of us that have means just haven't struggled financially in life. I mean, honestly, when you think about it, it's just like overflow from the overflow. At what point is it just too much? Like, what am I going to do with all of that? You feel that almost that responsibility. I mean, I think it is. It's a responsibility to do something with the overflow from the overflow. And so then that's where I found myself in the moment of Titus and that picture of the need. And then this picture in my head of like, representation of kind of how I felt like life was sometimes, that I just overflowed from overflow and resources. You put those two things together, and that was responsibility. It was just, I had to act. I had to do something. And that was my journey. That's not going to be everybody's journey, but I think we've all had those moments of going, wow, I'm just kind of sitting in some abundance here. I'm sitting in some extra. That's not all the time, but what do I do with that? If it's time, if it's energy, if it's skill set, it doesn't have to be that you're sitting on a big bank account to become a donor. We have board of directors, and like finding lawyers who can help us, navigate the legal things that we have to deal with in our work. You can do that for a local charity. I mean, that's another way to get involved and take maybe some overflow of your knowledge, right? And pour it into some other people. But recognizing that you've come to that place in your journey and like what you're going to do, it's pretty awesome. It can feel daunting, but like you've discovered this, right? You had an article in a subway. That moment.
It really is. I'm curious. I would imagine that. Well, how often have you traveled over towards to these countries in Africa for your
I've
work?
been a few times. I don't go a lot because we have these teams on the ground that do this work for us, and like we trust them with everything, really, and we're in constant contact with them. Thank goodness for the kind of technology we have available today. It's no different than being on this chat with you. But yeah, I've been over a couple times.
And what was it like the first time that you met individuals who went from not having water, who as a result of the work of the foundation you started, had clean water? What was that like?
Yeah. It wasn't what I expected at all. And I'll tell you a story about a girl that we met on the she was standing on the side of the road as we were leaving this one spot. So we had been driving that. I remember, I'll never forget that day, because just the experience in Kenya in this way is incredible. You don't get this when you go on tours. You got to know somebody who's going to drive you for 8 hours down a dirt road and then like take a left at a rock. I don't even know how they know where they are. That's what we did. And so we can't, it was just bone dry everywhere, sand, bramble. And I thought we did water out here. Like, and wow, but this was our, again, second year. I didn't know much of anything. And we turned the corner and there was this lush just outcropping of, there were banana plants, which are those huge leafed plants that you see like sometimes in a rainforest area. There was corn everywhere. There was kale growing up a hillside. And then we came a little bit further and there was just this reservoir, which was a fresh sand dam. You mentioned that earlier in the call, that had been built and had trapped that year's rains, and they were just now soaking into the ground. And it had created an oasis in the middle of this really desert area. And the people were gathering water. And I was like, oh, those are kids gathering dirty water, just like in the pictures. Like, no, those kids are gathering water to water the plants. Like they've got water. Which was great, because it was like, my expectation of the picture I saw was totally wrong. That's a great thing about charities. Be ready to be wrong. It's a good learning experience. And so we saw all that, and we saw this flourishing that was happening, because you can't describe it any other way when you see that much green and food growing where it wasn't before, and people are genuinely happy about doing the work to grow and take care of each other. So we're getting ready to leave. We'd been there about an hour, and Titus, I was with Titus. Titus was he could talk to anybody. And there was this girl standing on the side of the road with a green binder, and he just chatted her up. Just, hi, how are you? What are you doing here? And I think she was like 16. And she explained to Titus, and he was telling us the story later because they were speaking in their native language. And he said, that's Bridget. And Bridget is an AIDS orphan. Both her mother and her father died of AIDS, and she was living with her grandparents. And her grandparents were also housing 8 other orphans in their community. And Bridget was explaining to Titus how everything changed once water was available, because what had been a struggle for her grandparents just to take care of a couple orphans became an opportunity for them to take care of 8 because there was food, there was water, all the things that they were struggling with had been taken away. It's like immediately you go, like your horizon for what this work can do is expanded. But then the moment hit when he said, well, what's this binder? What's this green binder you're holding? And she said, oh, this is my ledger where I keep track of a business I started. I plant tree seedlings that I sell in the local market. So she was planting mangoes, I think. And then she would grow them and water them with the water that was provided by the sand dam that was in her community. And then she would bring these tree seedlings to the market and she'd make a profit. And like, just stop there, full stop. Like, wow. That's a great story. I mean, here's success. She's an HIV/AIDS orphan. Like, it should have been the picture of disaster. And she's starting her own business. You know, grandparents are raising other orphans in the community because they can now afford to, and they have food to feed them. And I would have been okay there. Like, there would have been plenty of joy. And Titus then asked the next question, well, what are you going to do with all that money, Bridget? And Bridget doesn't skip a beat. Bridget says, well, I'm going to invest it back into the other orphans. What else would I do with it? And it was this one moment of intense joy and just like, I don't know, crushing humility. Is that a way to put it? Like, here is Bridget, who for the first time in her life is experiencing a taste of abundance and of flourishing in the profit that she's making in her business. And her not skip a beat, just raw humanity of, I'm just going to help the next person that needs it. I don't know. That was it. I'm doing water the rest of my life. That's all it was going to take for me. It was because I think we all get to be Bridget. Like, if we just get out of ourselves way long enough to recognize the humanity around us, to recognize that everybody's broken in some way, that it doesn't make me your savior because I helped you out. It doesn't make me responsible for you forever. Like, we're in this together as humanity. Bridget understood that. Nobody had to teach that. And what a miraculous picture of who we can be. And I think at the same moment I realized I'm not sure Bridget's the poor one here. When it comes to relationship and compassion and humility and work ethic, she had every excuse not to work. And yet she's here starting her own business. And I left in that moment and thought, I don't think Bridget's the poor one here. It might be me. And I might have more to learn here than I do to give here. And that's relationship, right?
Sure is. Wonderful story to share. Thank you for that. It's just, when you strip down what we have around us on a regular basis and you put an environment like you just described where they're just happy to be able to take care of more people and be self-sustaining, just the simple things. And that's, water seems to be such a simple thing. And the fact that we can help to bring it to those and make these changes is it's a phenomenal amount of work that you do. It's so impressive because it's such a large scale and you're going across continents to get it done. Is there a common theme or thread that you find amongst your most engaged donors as far as personalities or types of people or professions that they're in or age group that they're in?
We try, because it's supposed to be better at like reaching them if we do that. But it's the gamut. It's a kind of beautiful picture of humanity, from young kids, like really young kids. One of our largest donors early on was a young boy named Liam, who had terminal cancer, ended up passing, and raised money for the water project because he saw an opportunity to do good in the world. And Liam's legacy lives on today because, something in him stirred that he wanted to do this, even in the midst of his own suffering and all the stuff that he was going through. And their family remains, connected to us today. Like, talk about relationship. We were really, really close to that wonderful, loving family. All the way through to somebody on the other end, that got to live a long, full life, is in their 80s, 90s, and are just experiencing philanthropy for the first time, had some abundance in their own life and are coming to the table and going, how can I help women? I just want to help women like me. Like, I know they're hardworking and I know they're entrepreneurial and they've got this ridiculous obstacle of lack of water in their way. How can I fix that? In my 80s or not, and even, approaching 90s, like, how do I do it? So some people discover that at 6, some people at 86, and then everybody in between, in all different kinds of professions. Here we've got folks that build luxury pools, and they're like part of a guild that makes luxury pools for people that obviously have abundance, because you don't have a luxury pool unless you have some abundance. And they're pouring money into water projects because it's just a way for them to give back and to introduce that, that to other people. Plumbers that are doing the same thing, that know how important water is, because when do you know you need water? When it stops coming out of your pipe. Like, that's when we all realize what the water crisis is. So we got plumbers that do this, but then school teachers and lots and lots of college kids that are trying to discover, can my life be about something, not just about me. But I do think it's the same discovery for everybody, as you mentioned, like coming to that place in your journey where you go, like, I know the world's broken. You don't have to convince me of that. I know there's things that need fixing. Do I play a part in that in any way? Can I leave a legacy in some way with that? And can I do it in a way that I know what I did? Because it's not selfish to want to know.
Yeah.
Because I think it satisfies the longing that we do carry with us to do something, to see the world flourish. And so if that means that getting to see pictures and getting to engage with it means that gets satisfied, well, that's not selfish at all. That's just fulfill. It's coming to contentment with what we're supposed to be doing, And I guess what I love too is people don't change their whole lives to do this. They don't upend their whole careers. Some people, we got a guy that builds decks, for crying out loud. And he didn't stop building decks. He just moved some of that money to do this kind of work. No matter where you are, there's a place to fit.
Yeah, you don't have to be a wealthy person to be a charitable and giving person. As you said earlier, you can give with sweat equity. Just call up and say, what can I do to help? I'll give you my time. It's a matter of, I think there's some statistic on your website of how much money is needed really to bring water to one person. When you break it down, is like in the 30s or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to give more than $35, $40 or anything to make an impact and to see that impact. So I get a lot of satisfaction. I have to safely and smartly enjoy every moment of life. But there's ways that you can help others and feel good about it. And now that I've been practicing law for 26 years, I think it is, I'm in this phase where I'm really getting a lot of satisfaction about sharing my knowledge and experience with other lawyers. One of the reasons I'm doing this podcast and all the lectures I do. And in that is sharing, any fruits of those efforts to help others. And so I'm happy to announce here on my podcast with you, to my listeners, that I am in the process of editing a book, my first book on how to litigate a personal injury case. And we hope to be completed and have it out by the end of this year for practitioners to use, for students to use, for whatever it may be. And 100% of the proceeds from the sale of the books is going to go to the Water Project. And the idea is that I'm doing something to give back to other lawyers or law students to help them learn as they are in or enter the profession. And then in turn, they're getting a benefit by getting a book that can give them more knowledge and help them become a better attorney, better person. And then whatever money they spend on that is now going to go and end up bringing clean water to those who need it in sub-Saharan Africa. So for me, that sequence of events and the fact that that can happen is just, it's so rewarding that it's very hard to put into words. Yeah. And then the idea is I have more books to come after that on trial skills, on other things. And hopefully the books become successful. Maybe they'll get into law schools, and who knows what will happen from here. But if they can continue to generate and be a legacy where all that can go to better the world, who would think a lawyer in New York could, better the world a continent away and change people's lives just by giving back things that I've learned. So I don't know if that's selfish of me because I get joy out of it, but it's it's really cool, and I feel very fortunate that just my sweat equity is really can help raise all of this money without even having to write a check, you know.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, that's what it's about. We pay it forward in whatever way we can. It's sort of that cliche. You hear it, well, but it's just having a bit of an imagination for what that might look like for you, as a person. And like you said, the invitation is to come and kind of dip your toe in, and to see what it would be like. $34, if you give to us, you want to give water to one person, and just see if that's where it's at for you. Understand that, what it's like to hear back from a charity, and if it's not us, by all means, wherever you give, make sure you find out what's happening with the money, not because you don't trust, but because that's where the joy is. It's not selfish to say, well, what happened? Or what's going to happen, because that's why you got involved in the first place. And how you bring, as you said, all of that got poured into you. And I know from your father, like it comes down through the family, and he passed all that on to you. And this is how you get to pass it forward. That is what legacy is about. I mean, that's how we deal with some of this broken, messed up stuff that we've all seen around us come raging out in the last couple of years. Is we just we do our part.
Peter, how do you suggest someone who wants to dip their toe in and see what it's like? What's the best way to do that?
One, I'd love to see you come around our table with us. Obviously, I think we have an incredible experience. As deep as you want to go. If you want to give and then just kind of quietly watch and see, by all means, do that. If you want to go big, or maybe you want to do a fundraiser, or you just want to get on the phone with us and understand the work in a deeper way, let's do that. If you're at a point in your life where you're going, I got to go bold, I got to go big, or I'm not going to do this, go bold and big, do that. Don't hold back. We will meet you wherever you want to come to the table, and you don't have to know anything about this. We can explain everything all along the way, as much as you're comfortable. That, and look around. What's happening in your neighborhood? What's happening in your community that's local, where the relationship can be one-on-one? Somebody, actually was a board member of mine, and I think it's some advice that somebody gave to her that they said was life-changing for them, was when you pass somebody on the street that's down and out, just start by looking them in the eye. That's it. Nothing else. Just start there. And that's hard. Like, that's not easy. So you want a big challenge, think maybe start on that one. But what I mean in that is, I think there's opportunities for us to get in carefully, and depending on where you are in your journey, that may be the first step for you. And I'd take it. Don't wait to feel like you have to take this big, bold moment. For others of us, we may need the big, bold thing to kind of shake us out of our place that we're in. So go big, go bold. Don't be afraid of that either. And then all of us, in our day-to-day, let's try to recapture some humanity of one another. So let's look each other in the eye. And even when that may be painful, right? When we're seeing somebody that's having at least it may spark some imagination in you. Maybe you don't know what to do with that person in front of you, and that's okay, but it may spark some, imagination in you to, what can I do to make this world a little bit better? It begins to plant those seeds. So again, it's like a spectrum, like wherever you enter, just come to the table. And whatever it is that you keep chewing on, that's like the excuse to not do it. You're just putting off happiness. So if that's your jam, if putting off contentment and joy is, if that feels good to you, I suppose keep doing that. But if you're just waiting for what you're experiencing already, Andrew, which is the joy of being able to give and get involved in this. And it really is. I've heard you 3-4 times say, I can't really put it into words, because you can't.
Yeah.
If you could, then you could sell it, but you can't. You got to do it.
Well, I want to, in addition to thanking you and the Water Project, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to one of your valued team members, Tess Crick.
Yeah.
Tess was the first person that connected with me when I expressed interest to the Water Project. And to this day, she is my direct contact. And she's met with me, she's educated me, she's met my family, and just a wonderful person. And when dealing with your organization and dealing with Tess, she helped guide me and continues to learn and to enjoy the process of helping others. So a lot of thanks to Tess. And I want to wrap up by asking you a question. It is a question that I usually ask the lawyers who are guests on my podcast.
Oh, good. A test.
So it's a test, an easy one, hopefully. The question that I normally ask lawyers at the end of each of my podcasts is, can you give me, please, your definition of what it means to be a great lawyer? And I've heard a lot of different answers to that. For you, since you're not an attorney, are you?
Nope.
Okay. I'm sure you're around them a lot.
I like to play one on TV. But.
Yeah. So maybe you'd be kind enough to give me your definition of a great person, because you deal with a lot of people. You deal with donors, you deal with colleagues, you deal with the recipients of the charitable donations in the form of water in Africa, the people who you work with. So, Peter, what is your definition of a great person?
I think we see it in almost every great story that we, maybe we watch in movies, and the hero story, or that we read, that there's a moment when you recognize that for someone else to flourish or to survive, you've got to lay down a portion or all of yourself for that to happen. And it's cliche because we all say, to give your life for somebody else. And it may not, it doesn't start there. I don't know many heroes that start with that act. Like, the hero grows over time. Iron Man's a great example, right? If you watch the Marvel series, my kids love the Marvel series. Iron Man starts out this unbelievably selfish, arrogant, kind of jerk in the early, that's just focused on himself. And it takes the entire Marvel series, the arc of time. And I guess if I give away a spoiler, but like he ends up really good guy, like lays it down. But there's a long journey in that. And so I think maybe what makes a good person is the willingness to just live into that journey. And so if you're Iron Man, like 1.0, it's like looking in the mirror and going, man, there's some things that this just doesn't make me happy. Living for myself every single day is just not cutting it. I'm not content. I can never find joy that lasts, or happiness that lasts more than the next jet ski. I think there's something more to this. And then, like I said, taking that first step on that journey, where can I lay down a little of myself? And I think you'll find it's addictive, because I think that's in the core of, who we are as humans. I kept using the word flourishing. I think we find greater satisfaction, greater joy, greater contentment in doing things for others than we're ever going to find in doing things for ourselves. Now, it may just start with your family. I think fathers get this, right? You always pour into our kids. Wouldn't think anything otherwise, because there's enormous joy from that. And people around you that don't know that would go, man, you're giving up all your time, all your money, all your sanity, like your sleep. And you go, I would never do anything different. Like, it's just a great example of a place where you've said, no, I'm actually going to step into that journey of laying myself down. It happens to be for family, but when you start to expand that horizon a little bit. So yeah, it's a long definition, I guess, but the willingness to live into the journey of setting yourself aside for others, wherever you start.
I think it's a great definition, and I like your term of laying yourself down for someone, whoever it may be. And you could do it at any stage in your life, at any age, with or without the assistance of finances. You can always give of yourself to someone somehow, and that can help you become a great person and help you on your journey. Well, Peter, I thank you for taking the time to spend with us here on my podcast. And I know we'll stay in touch and look forward to future projects, and keep up the great work that you do. I'll be here, and I'm hoping to bring some more people into the fold. And I look forward to see what the future has for the Water Project and for all of us. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Introducing us to other people is a huge gift in and of itself. So I appreciate you bringing us to your network of people and helping us to, expand our reach a little bit. Thanks for your support and your family support, and I know is going to continue. It's been it's done a lot of great things. You've seen it. And so thanks. And thanks for this time. It's a great chat. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all to listening to another episode of the Mentor ESQ podcast. I'm sure you enjoyed hearing from Peter Chasse, the founder and president of an amazing organization called the Water Project. To learn more, visit thewaterproject.org. You can go to my website, thementoresq.com, and just look for the links for the Water Project, for the Mentor ESQ's campaign for water, and reach out to me or Peter or anyone at the Water Project with any questions. And look forward to seeing you on my next episode. Please continue to share my podcast with those who you think may enjoy it, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.